Hello and welcome to the Brainstem Part 2. The mesencephalon. Mesencephalon is divided into portions, the tectum and the cerebral peduncles. Here you have a transverse section of a dog's brain at the level of the mesencephalon. Okay, what do you have? First, before going to the mesencephalon, what do you identify here? This is the corpus callosum, the splenium of the corpus callosum, right? The cingulate gyrus, cingulum, the hippocampus right here, okay? And then you see here the mesencephalon. Mesencephalon is divided in a tectum, here in red, that is formed by the lamina quadrigemina, that is formed by the two rostral colliculi and two caudal colliculi. And we have the cerebral peduncles. This is a pair structure. We have one on each side. And eventually, the cerebral peduncles form the crus cerebri. Here, in this image, is a ventral image of a dog's brain. And I have marked in yellow the part of the mesencephalon. And this part is the crus cerebri because it's the ventral portion of the cerebral peduncles, right? We will start by the tectum and pretectal area. The tectum is formed by the two rostral colliculi and two caudal colliculi, okay? The rostral colliculi are involved in visual reflexes and the caudal colliculi are involved in auditory reflexes. And here, just rostral to the rostral colliculi, we have the pretectal area, just caudal to the caudal commissure. Remember that the caudal commissure belongs to the epithalamus, that is the encephalon. However, the pretectal area belongs to the mesencephalon, to the tectum mesencephali. Okay? The colliculi, they have a commissure between them, between the two rostral and between the two caudal. Okay, it's very easy to identify externally the commissure between the two caudal colliculi. Right here, this is the commissura of the caudal colliculi. All right, and under the tectum, we have the mesencephalic aqueduct. This is the mesencephalic aqueduct with the periaqueductal gray matter. Again, on top, you see the commissura of the rostral colliculis. However, this one is smaller than the commissura of the caudal colliculi. You know that the pretectal area is important, right, in visual pathways, right here. Okay. There you have another image. This one here is that I mark is the pretectal area. Okay. In the sheep, this is in the case of a sheep, and you see that the rostral colliculus is quite big. Here you have the caudal colliculus. If you compare it with dogs, the rostral in this case seems to be much bigger. And there you see the pineal gland. Sorry, this is the pineal gland. So in a transverse section, the caudal colliculus and then a big rostral colliculus. Okay. Okay, we are still in the mesencephalon. It is around the mesencephalic aqueduct, we have the periaqueductal gray matter. In further lessons, we'll see the importance of the periaqueductal gray matter. Then, this portion of the ventral portion of the periaqueductal gray matter is going to form the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. This fasciculus is going to extend ventral to the fourth ventricle and down and caudal up to the spinal cord in the cervical segments at the level of the dorsal gray commissure. Here, this one here. So again, in the mulligan, you see the periaqueductal gray matter, right? And in this section, it is not a perfect one because as we see in the dorsal portion, we see the mesothalamus with the lateral geniculate bodies, the medial geniculate body, but ventrally we see mesencephalon. And which structures we identify in the mesencephalon? This one here. That is the red nucleus. Red nucleus. Remember this nuclei, because in another lesson we are going to talk about sensory motor systems. So these nuclei are going to be involved. Then we have the substantia nigra here, and we have talked about it because inhibition cells or inhibitory cells, GABAergic cells from the substantia nigra are going to be projected to the brainstem nuclei to control saccadic movements, and dopaminergic neurons are going to be projected to the basal nuclei to control its action. So lesions affecting the substantia nigra may disrupt or may damage the correct movements, right? So again, here you have the substantia nigra, and ventral to the substantia nigra, we have the crus cerebri formed by corticopontine and corticospinal fibers. And in between, in this level here, we have the interpeduncular nucleus. Remember that this nucleus was connected with the avenula. Again, in this image, you see the periaqueductal gray matter around the Sylvian or mesencephalic aqueduct, and the ventral portion is the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. This image is a very nice image, right? Because here we are at the level of intercrural fossa, right here. So we have at this level, this is the crus cerebri, right? Crus cerebri here with the substantia nigra. And here there is a nerve, is the oculomotor nerve. We will see that the oculomotor nerve, the nucleus, is located at this level, right? Ventral and very close to the midline, ventral to the periaqueductal gray matter. Okay, here. And their actions live in the intercrural fossa. They live, these actions live, and the oculomotor nerve. Remember that the oculomotor nerve has a somatic and visceral components. Okay, again in the mesencephalon. First, in this image here, you see that lateral to the periaqueductal gray matter, we have a nucleus. This is the nucleus of the mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve. We'll talk about it, this nucleus, later on, in particular. Nucleus of the mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve, right? Is for proprioception. Okay, from the mandibular nerve. Again, this nucleus is located here. You see these cells right here. Again, you see these cells correspond to the oculomotor nucleus, right? Nucleus of the third cranial nerve. And ventral, the medial longitudinal fasciculus. This fasciculus connects vestibular nuclei with nuclei that move the eye, the extraocular muscles, right? In the movements of these are studied in the movements of the nystagmus. And there is also the medial longitudinal fasciculus continues in the spinal cord at the cervical segments in the ventral funiculus. So it's connecting vestibular nuclei with nuclei of the oculomotor system, right? With the oculomotor, trochlear, abduction, right? And also is going down in the spinal cord in the ventral funiculus. Then we have here the tegmental decussation, right? The tegmental decussation. This is a decussation of fibers. I have talked, or I have said before, that there was a tract, the tectospinal tract. We'll see this tract later in another lesson. The tectospinal tract starts at the level of the rostral colliculus. It is joined by fibers from the caudal colliculus, and their fibers cross the midline at this point, at the decussation of the tegmental decussation, right here. And they go down, right, forming the tectospinal tract, okay? And ventral, at this ventral portion of the tegmental decussation, we have another decussation. Fibers coming from here. This is the red nucleus. It's a nucleus that belongs to the extrapyramidal system. Okay, it's a motor nucleus. The red nucleus is this one here, is the red nucleus. The axons cross the midline at the ventral portion of the tegmental decussation, and they go down into the spinal cord in the lateral funiculus, forming the rubrospinal tract. Okay, and on top of the substantia nigra, we found the spinothalamic tract. This comes from the spinal segments and reaches the thalamus for nociception. And medially to it, the medial lemniscus and the trigeminal lemniscus. Right here, they also send information to the thalamus. We'll see these tracts later on applied functionally. Okay. So again, as we move, this section was done at this level. Okay, it's not perpendicular, right? So what do we see? On top, we see the rostral colliculi, right? Rostral colliculi of the mesencephalon. We see the mesencephalic aqueduct and the periaqueductal gray matter. And ventrally, we are cutting the pons, right? The pons. This is a cerebellar peduncle and the trigeminal nerve right here. Okay, this is the trigeminal nerve. It should be going rostrally, right? So at this level, because we are a bit more caudal than the first section, we found the trochlear nucleus, the motor nucleus of the trochlear nerve, right? Okay, and as well as we go into histology, periaqueductal gray matter. Here we have the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. Remember the nucleus and mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve, the nucleus of the mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve, right? And you see here, this one here is this structure, is the medial longitudinal fasciculus, ¿vale? Medial longitudinal fasciculus. Remember that this fasciculus is connecting nuclei that move the eye with the vestibular nuclei, right? And right here, this is another decussation. This is the decussation of the rostral cerebellar peduncles. As we will see when we will talk about the cerebellum is connected to the brainstem through the rostral, medial, and caudal cerebellar peduncles. The rostral one is formed by fibers that leave, the fibers that leave through the rostral cerebellar peduncle, right? They cross the midline at the decussation of the rostral cerebellar peduncles, and they go to the prosencephalon. Okay. We reached the level of the pons, right here, the pons. And again, a transverse section. So we are cutting at the level at here, at the level of the caudal colliculi, right here. In the middle, we have part of the cerebellum. And then ventrally, we have the pons with the middle cerebellar peduncle that connects the pons to the cerebellum. And laterally, we have the trigeminal nerve. Okay, right. So this is a Bialchowski, right? And what do we see here? Well, ventrally, the pons is located here, caudal to the mesencephalon and rostral to the medulla oblongata. So again, the caudal colliculi, in the middle, the vermis of the cerebellum. And here, again, this area is the continuation of this one that was located ventral to the mesencephalic aqueduct, that is the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus, also named Schuth fascicle, okay? That runs between hypothalamic nuclei and general visceral efferent nuclei of the brainstem, okay? So it's very close to this, related with the hypothalamus. And ventral to it, the medial longitudinal fasciculus that we have talked previously. On top, there is a very important nucleus, okay, because it's one of the micturition centers. It's the locus caeruleus, okay? is a collection of adrenergic neurons, okay, that store, synthesize, and release noradrenaline, okay? It is also known as the Pontine micturition center, that related in the voiding the urinary bladder, okay, in the detrusor reflex. Here, the mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve. Remember that it's gone up and it's going to reach this nucleus. It's going to reach this nucleus here, the nucleus of the mesencephalic tract of the trigeminal nerve, located lateral to the periaqueductal gray matter in the mesencephalon. Other structures that are very interesting is the rostral cerebellar peduncle. Remember that the cerebellum is connected through the rostral cerebellar peduncle with the mesencephalon, and the fibers that live cross the midline in the, here, as I have said, in the decussation of the rostral cerebellar peduncles. Another important, the rubrospinal tract. Remember that these fibers have crossed the midline at the tegmental decussation in the mesencephalon, and they are coming down in order to reach the spinal cord. Is the rubrospinal tract, okay, in the lateral funiculus. What else? The lateral lemniscus. This lateral lemniscus is a tract of fibers that is coming from the dorsal nuclei of the trapezoid body for audition. They are auditory, acoustic fibers, and they are going up and they reach the caudal colliculus. And remember when we were talking about the metathalamus, the caudal colliculus receives acoustic information, and this acoustic information is projected, okay, to the medial geniculate body, okay, of the metathalamus, and from there it goes to the temporal cortex. Again, the spinothalamic tract for nociception and the medial lemniscus that sends information here. This structure, this sends information for proprioceptive information to the thalamus. Okay, this is a midbrain section on MRI in a T2 sequence, and it's important we are going to focus in this area. Where are we? Mesencephalon, right? This is the tectum, the mesencephalic aqueduct. Remember that the mesencephalic aqueduct does not belong to the tectum. It belongs to the crus cerebri. To the brachium of the mesencephalon. As you see, remember, go back here. Right. To the cerebral peduncles. Look at this. The mesencephalic aqueduct belongs to the cerebral peduncles, not to the tectum. Okay. So, and then the pons and the medulla oblongata. Right. See how the mesencephalic aqueduct opens caudally. However, it has the cerebellum, but is separated by the roof of, at this point, the roof of the fourth ventricle. It is very thin, and so the cerebellum, it is not in contact with the CSF inside this mesencephalic aqueduct and fourth ventricle. There is a thin lamina. This one here, there is a thin lamina, right? Is the roof of the fourth ventricle, right? Okay. Right. It is also named the rostral medullary velum. Okay. Okay, this rostral medullary velum is like that. Okay, there is the caudal colliculi, the commissure of the caudal colliculi here. So we have the opening of the mesencephalic aqueduct, and then this is part of the cerebellum. So this is to show you the rostral medullary velum that is closing the mesencephalic aqueduct caudally. And remember which structure we found here. We have the decussation of the trochlear nerve at the rostral medullary velum, just here, just caudal to the opening of the mesencephalic aqueduct. Okay. So we still are in the pons. okay? This is a sagittal section where you see and transverse sections. What I want you to point is that the pons, the ventral portion of the pons right here, because we have talked about that, remember, right? The spinothalamic tract, the medial lemniscus, the lateral lemniscus here, right? And ventral to it, we have the ventral portion that is formed by longitudinal fibers. Look at these fibers. These are longitudinal fibers. They are cortico-spinal fibers, cortico-pontine fibers, right? These are the longitudinal fibers. And among them, there are pontine nuclei, okay? This enlarged area is here with a Balchowski. And these pontine nuclei receive information from prosencephalic structures and send this information through the middle cerebellar peduncle inside the cerebellum. Okay? Okay. So we are still in the pons, but in the caudal portion of the pons. And now I want you to show you something is important. Two nuclei. Number one here is the sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, located rostral to the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. This receives pain and temperature. And the other one, medially located, is the motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, also named masticatory nucleus. Okay? Important. And in histology, you have it here, 1 and 2. Okay? The sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve and the motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, or masticatory nucleus. So again, we are at the level of the pons, remember that. Okay, look at these connections with the cerebellum, the middle cerebellar peduncle, the rostral. We'll see that when we'll talk about the cerebellum, right? And again, what you have here, this is the fourth ventricle. Okay, this is the floor of the fourth ventricle, the cerebellum there. And remember, this is the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. It's a fasciculus that comes from the periaqueductal gray matter that has opened, right? And continues caudally and connects a hypothalamic nuclei with general visceral nuclei. Okay? Right, again, this is the dorsal longitudinal fasciculus here. We are at the level of the pons. Remember, this is the ventral portion, right, with the longitudinal fibers, transverse fibers that connect the pontine nuclei with the cerebellum through the middle cerebellar peduncle here, right here. Okay. And the dorsal portion, remember, the medial lemniscus, spinothalamic tract, lateral lemniscus here. We reach the medulla oblongata. That means more long than wide. Okay, and again, dorsal, ventral, and raphe. Here I have marked in yellow the medulla oblongata. So this is the pons, the mesencephalon, this is the crus cerebri, right? The ventral portion of the cerebral peduncles, right? Okay, trigeminal nerve here, right? The abducens nerve here, and these are the pyramids, the trapezoid body, and the rest of the medulla oblongata, up to here, up to near the decussation of the pyramids here, right? So this is a ventrolateral view, where you see the trapezoid body related with the facial vestibulocochlear nerves, here the glossopharyngeus and vagus, right? The accessory, right here, okay, and here you have the hypoglossal nerve, okay, and this is the medulla oblongata with eventually the pyramids. So we'll start by the trapezoid body. That means like a trapeza, okay, from the Greek, a table. It is this portion here that is ventrally covered by the part of the pyramids. Remember that the pyramids are formed by the cortico-spinal fibers, right here. Okay, transverse section again, the pyramids right here, and these white fibers here, this is the facial and vestibulocochlear nerves, and these white fibers here form the trapezoid body. These are these transverse fibers, that are easily seen on a dissection on both sides of the more rostral portion of the pyramids. So, okay, and what do we have at this level? Here, in this transverse section, you see the lingula, part of the vermis, the cerebellar hemispheres, and then facial and vestibulocochlear nerves, right? And these white fibers, the trapezoid body, top of the pyramids, and continue right here, okay? And there, this structure is the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body, formerly known superior olivary nucleus. Remember this name because it's written in some books, classic books, right? So the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body. And when I mean dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body, there is a ventral nucleus. And the ventral nuclei are scattered among the trapezoid body. Trapezoid body are the transverse fibers right here. Okay, this transverse fiber here. So this is the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body. We will see the function now. And now we start to see the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve and the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve here. Remember that we are at the fourth ventricle here, and what do we have? We have at this level, we have vestibular nuclei, right? The medial, right? Vestibular nucleus, the lateral vestibular nucleus, and this is the caudal cerebellar peduncle. This big is the caudal cerebellar peduncle. Okay, and the pyramids. And again, important, this is the motor nucleus of the abduction. Remember that the abduction cranial nerve, where was it? Here. The abduction cranial nerve was coming at this level, you see, between the pyramids and the trapezoid body and runs rostrally. Okay, so there you have the motor nucleus of the abduction, right? And here the genu of the facial nerve, because the facial nerve goes around the motor nucleus of the abduction cranial nerve and forms the internal genu of the facial nerve, and then leaves here between the rubrospinal tract and the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, and leaves. The facial fibers leave here. Okay, so again, this is a complete image, right? You have here, remember the dorsal nuclei or nucleus of the trapezoid body, formerly known as superior olivary nucleus. And again, the rubrospinal tract, look where it is a motor tract, right? And this is a sensory spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve with the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, right? And here as well, the medial longitudinal fasciculus, because it's connecting vestibular nuclei with nuclei for the movement of the eyes. So let's go to this tract that is very, very important. This is a summary, okay? And what it represents, here you see very easily on a dissection, right? You see the spinal tract and the nucleus. And this spinal tract is a somatotopically organized. So somehow the fibers that go to the most dorsal portion are from the mandibula, on the dorsolateral from the maxillary nerve, and ventral from the ophthalmic nerve, right? And here we have the nucleus of this spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. And again, okay. So what I have done here. So remember that in the previous images, I have shown you the masticatory nucleus, right? The motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and with a relation with the sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, included in the most caudal portion of the pons. And this was receiving, through the semilunar ganglion, information from pain or nociception and temperature. And now here you have it, the ones that are in the spinal tract, the ones that are receiving tactile and pressure, right? But also from all the cranial nerves, general somatic afferent, from the facial, from the glossopharyngeal, from the vagus, they reach here. So this spinal tract is a kind of pathway to distribute information in order to enter this, the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, and to be able to respond to other reflexes and functions, right? And it's important to notice that this spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve continues in the spinal cord, and it does so as the dorsolateral tract. And the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve continues in the spinal cord as the substantia gelatinosa. So it's a continuation between brainstem and spinal cord, right? It's important to notice that. Okay. So we continue, and then what do we see? We see that we are at this level now. Okay. This is the dorsal cochlear nucleus. This comes from the cochlea on the inner ear, and these are these superficial arcuate fibers that go on top, these fibers here that go on top of the caudal cerebellar peduncle, and we will see where they go, okay, to the dorsal nuclei of the trapezoid body and to the audition, etc., etc., okay. And sorry, here you have it. So this is the caudal cerebellar peduncle, and on top you have this. These are the acoustic stria. The acoustic stria here is formed by fibers that are coming from the dorsal cochlear nucleus, and they go on top of the caudal cerebellar peduncle. Okay. So again, now we are having a look at the brainstem, and on top of the cerebellum, I have to move part of the flocculus in order to identify the acoustic stria. You see, this is the vestibulocochlear nerve, right? And so the acoustic fibers are going on top of the caudal cerebellar peduncle here. They form the acoustic stria. The acoustic stria jumping on top of the caudal cerebellar peduncle, right here. And where do they go? Right. This is a scheme that I think it will help you understand. Okay. So fibers from the dorsal cochlear nucleus, they go inside, they form the acoustic stria right here. This is important area. And then they go down, and they reach the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body. Okay. And from there, some fibers, they go up, or ipsilateral or contralaterally in the lateral lemniscus in order to reach the caudal colliculus. Other fibers from the ventral cochlear nucleus form the trapezoid body, and the ventral nuclei of the trapezoid body are scattered among the trapezoid body. These fibers, they enter the ipsilateral and contralateral nuclei, the dorsal nuclei of the trapezoid body. And again, these nuclei project through the lateral lemniscus to the caudal colliculus. Some fibers from the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body, what they do is they do the opposite. They run with the acoustic stria and they go to the ear. This is the olivocochlear fascicle. And this is to modulate the cochlea, right? Right. And this is important because the vestibulocochlear nerve, we always think that it's a sensory nerve, but it's not true because it has motor fibers forming the olivocochlear fascicle. And remember, this olivo because the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body was formerly known as rostral olivary nucleus. Okay, this image I have added this one because it's not a true one. Here, yes, we have the acoustic stria on top. However, at this level, these fibers, they go rostral and they reach here. We have the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body. The dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body is more rostrally located than the acoustic stria. Okay. So if we move caudal in the medulla oblongata, here you have the fourth ventricle, the cerebellum right here. Okay. The spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, rubrospinal tract, we know it is there. The caudal cerebellar peduncle, acoustic stria, right here. So we find that this is the motor nucleus of the facial nerve, very close to the rubrospinal tract. The rubrospinal tract is here located, ventral to the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. So these fibers from the motor nucleus of the facial nerve, they go up, they go around the nucleus of the abducens nerve. They form what is known the internal genu of the facial nerve, and they go down to live between the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve and the rubrospinal tract. Okay, this is the motor nucleus of the facial. And remember, again, we have the medial lemniscus and the spinothalamic tract, but at this level, we do not find the lateral lemniscus, because the lateral lemniscus has started in the dorsal nucleus of the trapezoid body that is located rostral to this section. Okay, we proceed in the medulla oblongata. This is the medulla oblongata on an MRI. This is the basio-occipital bone, right? The fourth ventricle here, the pyramids, right? And this is in a dissection where you see the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, right? On top we have the caudal cerebellar peduncle, right here. You see the caudal cerebellar peduncle and the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. In a Bialchowski, again, you see the caudal cerebellar peduncle, the spinal tract, and here you have part of the stria acoustica still, right? And you see the fourth ventricle filled with the choroidal plexuses of the fourth ventricle. Some of them are living through the lateral openings of the fourth ventricle. We proceed more caudally here at this level, and at this level we begin to identify the olivary nucleus. Here you have the olivary nucleus, lateral to the pyramids, the olivary nucleus. Okay, and some fibers coming out from the olivary nucleus, they form the olivocerebellar tract, fibers that cross the midline and enter the cerebellum, right? They belong to the extrapyramidal system. Okay, again, the deep arcuate fibers, they form the decussation of the medial lemniscus, right? The medial lemniscus, we will see later on, these fibers are coming from the nuclei as the cunate nucleus, gracile nucleus, Z nucleus, etc. So at this level, we found the motor nucleus of the hypoglossal nerve. And these fibers are coming down. Look, the nucleus is very close to the floor of the, or is in the floor of the fourth ventricle, right? Very close to the ventricle. And the fibers are coming down, and living between the pyramids and the olivary nucleus. You see, between the pyramids and the olivary nucleus, there are the fibers that are coming out and form the hypoglossal nerve. Also, we found other nerves, the solitary tract and the nucleus of the solitary tract, right? We will see that in visceral functions, right? When we'll talk about the cranial nerves, remember, the solitary tract and the nucleus, right? And also the caudal cerebellar peduncle, and also still some of vestibular nuclei here, okay? Because we are, but very, very extension, very caudal extension, right? So again, the spinothalamic tract located ventrally. So it's quite superficial, this spinothalamic tract. This is a general view of the medulla oblongata, right? With all the structures. Remember for the pathologists may need the solitary tract, the nucleus of the solitary tract, where it's located, right? Okay. And as you see, all these, the commissural fibers, right? The olivocerebellar tract and the decussation of the medial lemniscus, okay? Forming the deep arcuate fibers, here, okay? Deep arcuate fibers. So, again, we go a bit more caudal. we are at the level of the obex, here. Okay, the fourth ventricle, right? And then the fourth ventricle becomes a canal, right, that will continue as the central canal of the spinal cord. So we are at the level of the area postrema here, area postrema, and important to notice what you have here. You have the grathial fascicle here, right here, on top, and here the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. The spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. So this spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve can be easily identified from the outside, right? Look here. Sorry, this is the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. This one here is located here, sorry. And this is the grathial and the cunate, right, and fascicles here. Okay. So important, you see the motor nucleus of the hypoglossal nerve right here, right? Important other structures, the nucleus ambiguus, right? And the ventral reticular nucleus located. These cells belong to the ventral reticular nucleus. And again, look at this position. Lateral to the motor nucleus of the hypoglossal is the parasympathetic nucleus of the vagus nerve. So at this level again, we see the grathial fascicle, the cunate fascicle here, and the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve and spinocerebellar tracts. So externally, it's easy to identify them, very, very easy, right? And also all these fibers that jump and cover the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, these fibers here, are the superficial arcuate fibers. These are fibers that are leaving the lateral reticular nucleus and they join the caudal cerebellar peduncle. All right, here. So in a transverse, you see the grathial fascicle. This is the grathial fascicle here. We see again the fasciculus cuneatus, or the cunate fascicle, and lateral, this structure is the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, with the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve. And more ventrally, you have the spinocerebellar tract. Okay, so these structures can be identified externally. So again, you have this whole picture, right? And again, do not forget about the medial longitudinal fasciculus and now the tectospinal tract located here. The pyramids and the olivary nucleus, and lateral to it, the spinothalamic tract. Okay? So now we are approaching a very specific area. Is the decussation of the pyramids. Very important. But before, we are going to talk about this area on top of this section, right? What do we have? This is a Bialchowski, right? Impregnation, right? And the central canal, and on top, we see some collection of cells. And they are, this one here is the Z nucleus, right? And the one that is more ventral and laterally located is the nucleus gracilis. So it has been considered the nucleus theta as part of the gracilis nucleus. It is involved in proprioception, right? In proprioception, particularly proprioception from the hind limb. And then these collections here are these ones here, and we are going to follow this to this that is marked in red. So we have the nucleus cuneatus medialis, or medial cunate nucleus, and the lateral cunate nucleus for proprioception, for conscious and unconscious proprioception. We'll see that in the pathways, when we'll study the pathways, right, of proprioception. Again, it's important to remember, this is again at this image, okay, and this image located around here. What do we see? We see structures that are important to remember. The motor nucleus of the nucleus, this is the nucleus ambiguous of the accessory, right? Also, we have the lateral reticular nucleus, okay? And the fibers from the lateral reticular nucleus, this area has been enlarged here. The lateral reticular nucleus projects fibers through the superficial arcuate fibers. They form the superficial arcuate fibers, right? and they are located on top of the caudal cerebellar peduncle, right? These are involved in posture, grasping, locomotion, scratching, respiration. Yeah, it is an important center. The lateral reticular nucleus and the ventral reticular nucleus here. Okay, so remember when we look this image, we are still seeing what? The spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve and the nucleus of the spinal tract of the trigeminal nerve, the nucleus and the spinal tract, right? And remember that these structures are continuous in the spinal cord as the Lissauer's bundle also, or the dorsolateral tract, this one here, and the substantia gelatinosa. So these structures are continued in the spinal cord, right? Okay. So important, again, all these fibers, we are at the level of the decussation of the pyramids, right? So remember that the pyramids were ventrally located. So now the fibers are going to go up, cross the midline, and then deviate laterally, as this arrow marks. This is the medial longitudinal fasciculus and tectospinal tract. Okay, they are going to form funiculi in the spinal cord, right? And these are fibers because it's a Bialchowski. They go up, and they locate here. These areas here belong to the beginning of this corticospinal tract in the spinal tract. Okay, these are fibers from the corticospinal tract that are beginning to be located in the location that they will have in the spinal cord. And here, the rubrospinal tract. Okay. So again, in this image, you see that this rectangular area, it is enlarged here, and you see these are the fibers that cross the midline at the decussation of the pyramids. The pyramids are located there. The fibers go up, they deviate laterally, and here they begin to form these fibers that are going to go down in the spinal cord. Is the corticospinal tract. And ventrolaterally to it, we have the rubrospinal tract. Look at it. This again, in this area, you see these fibers, the pyramids, the fibers that go up, they decussate, forming the decussation of the pyramids, and they move laterally in order to form the corticospinal tract with its location in the spinal cord. And all these fibers here, that will become the ventral funiculus in the spinal cord. Thank you very much.